evening, everyone, and welcome to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner, episode number 233, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, the classic 1984 science fiction film starring William Shatner, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, and a lot of others. With me tonight is our special guests. Joining us from Sci-Fi Distilled are our friends Mike and Marybeth. Welcome, Mike and Marybeth.
Hi, thanks for having us.
And my co-host, my friend of 40 plus years, God, we're old, Ross, Mr. Ross Amico.
Thanks, Roy.
Hey, Ross. Hey, everyone. Hey, Mike, Marybeth, how are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Doing good.
Like your jazzy open now.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, that is actually compliments of Jeffrey Morris. He hooked us up, which was really, really nice. So yeah, but thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, a little bit more upbeat. It's kind of like going from the first season of Space 1999, where it was like really grand, and now we're kind of doing the jazz for a year or two.
There you go.
I had to slip the Space 1999 in, Ross, because I know how much of a fan you are of that show.
Yeah, you already lost me.
Anyway, I want to welcome the folks that are out there in the comments section. Folks, please bear with me because I am having technical issues. Go figure. But as I try to click on the comment section. Yeah, it's been a little. Hold on one second here. Oh boy, good way to start off the evening here. Nope. There we go. We got nobody in the comments section. This is weird.
We are also out there.
Are we on? It says live.
Chatting.
Oh, you got Colin.
Yeah, read those
Hey,
hello.
Colin's out there.
It's
Welcome,
still early
Colin.
for everyone. That's the problem. You've
They're
trained
not
them.
used to you being. They're going to come in about 15, 20 minutes.
Exactly.
Cumberland.
You've trained them.
Colin is actually joining us from the UK. Welcome, Colin.
Hi, Colin.
And I see Matt is out there. Matt Anthony's joining us from
you're
Philly.
late.
Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Jeff,
And
I
Hi, Jeff.
recognize that.
Yeah.
Jeff comes to our show all the time.
Jeff's
Oh,
on
yeah.
our
Jeff's joining us from Utah. Welcome, Jeff. And let me see. I guess they're gonna dribble in. You know what the problem is? It's summer. Well, we're on the edge of summer, entering June, and it's a beautiful night here on the East Coast. So
Yeah, it's a nice night out.
We're gonna tribble in, is what it is.
Tribble.
We're gonna tribble in.
Well, there'll be no trouble at all.
Hi, hon. Sherry's downstairs listening.
Right?
She's saying she loves this movie.
No shower scenes, from what I
No
remember.
shower. Yeah, no, not even a Sonic shower scene. That was in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Anyway, all righty. Well, welcome everybody. We're glad you're here, and we're glad to be here. And yeah, this movie actually came out 40 years ago tomorrow, which is incredible. Which is
Hard to
crazy.
believe.
Yeah, and it really just warranted discussion, and definitely thought the four of us talking about this would be great. And it brings back a lot of memories in regards to that. But I want to hear what you guys have to, do you recall seeing this movie the very first time?
Um,
I'll start with you, Mike.
yeah, I mean, what year was it now? 40 years ago?
84?
Yeah,
84. Yeah.
84. So yeah, I saw it in the theater. I don't know. I don't remember having a particular reaction to it. Like, oh, this was great or it was terrible. It's not my favorite Star Trek film by any means. But it when you think about it, it's only about an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, if you can't discount the credits, it's got a really long credit intro too. So it's really like almost like a 90-minute movie. And it felt like to me, like we're just doing this really quick to get Spock alive again so we can move on.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, if you didn't know.
Ross is always busting my chops, and I'm always like, Ross, we're talking about 40 and 50-year-old movies. It's okay. We can spoil people. It's all right.
And the funny thing is, you mentioned that it is a 40-year-old movie, and I think it shows its age. with the effects mostly.
I agree.
The effects,
Although the
some of
shot
the
of
effects
the
just didn't
Enterprise
hold up to me.
burning was still looking good. But yeah, I agree with that.
The space stuff has always looked good. It was the planetary stuff I think that didn't hold up to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
How
Mary
about
Beth,
you, Marybeth? Yeah.
when did you first see it?
You know, I did not see it in the theater. I would have seen it at home, I think. And it had been a hot minute since I watched it. So I rewatched it for tonight. And wow, it wasn't what I remember. But it was good. It was still good. So you guys know conventional wisdom is that odd numbered Star Treks are not that good. But you know what? I mean, this may have been a little simple, but I thought it hung in there. I thought it was okay. And we wanted Spock back anyway. That was the whole thing with Nick Meyer when he directed the Wrath of Khan and Spock was gonna die, he was all excited. And then when they said, "Do you want to direct this one?" He was like, "No, we killed Spock. Why are you no, he's dead. No." Like he just didn't get it. So Leonard directed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you know, that we talk about the odd movies. This is probably the better of the odd movies. Certainly, I think, you know, because the motion picture, there's a lot of controversy whether people they either like it or they don't. I'm kind of in the camp that it was just boring. You know, it wasn't a horrible movie, but of course, you know, Wrath of Khan was so much better. So this, I don't know, this kind of just felt like kind of an addendum to Wrath of Khan, sort of. I don't know. It just wasn't like it didn't feel like its own movie in its own right. Like it was more like
It was definitely like an
2,
extension.
3, and 4, like a little mini trilogy.
well, I mean,
Sure.
the whole thing is like it starts with Space Seed, then we get Wrath of Khan, then we get Search for Spock, and then Voyage Home. That's all one story.
All one story.
Right.
Yep.
How
And you
about-
know, they planted this seed of darkness in Kirk. You know, they killed off David. They planted that seed. They did not pay that off until
Well, they did in
Country.
yeah,
Like until
yeah,
number 6.
yeah. Well, that's 2 movies past. Well, 3, I guess. Yeah.
3. That's a long time to wait to pay that off, I think.
There
Well-
was a bit of a space there, a gap. I mean, they touched upon it, I think, in 5 a bit, but it really came out more in 6. But I think it's just because of the type of the movie 5 was, and God help us,
Maybe, yeah.
that's going down. Talk about going down a rabbit hole with that film, and as far as being disappointed and like, you know, going to the theater and saying what the heck just happened. I remember being at the Eric Theater, and when that film ended, and I was just like, what? But
Yeah,
anyway.
we were like that. There's a lot of cringeworthy moments in 5.
Yeah,
So if you want to have us back for 5, Roy, when that hits 40,
Oh yeah, we can
we definitely can. We can
we can
definitely
rip that one to
do all the odd ones. Like we can just rip them apart.
Ross, I want to hear what your thoughts are in regards to 3 when you saw it.
You know, I saw it in the movies, as I did everything back then. You know, this was the summer. It's '84, summer of Temple of Doom, Gremlins, Ghostbusters. You know, so we're still, you know, we grew up on these things. We knew that when summer came, we were going to get all the blockbusters, all the sci-fi, all the fantasy, all the adventure movies. You know, now it's year round, but you know, back then it was like, you know, when Memorial Day was coming up, that's it. You know. So yeah, I mean, I saw it. I know one time I saw it with you. I saw everything a couple of times, of course.
Right.
So apparently we didn't see it together when it opened, because you saw it in Allentown, you said?
No, ironically enough, I saw that. Well, I was supposed to go to a high school prom, and then what happened was it was not from my school. It was somebody that was somebody that was at your school, Ross. And what happened was it fell apart. It didn't wind up happening. And then the movie was coming out that Friday, so it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to the prom, but you know what? I'm going to see Star Trek 3, the Search for Spock, and I went with Ed Dicker, who I graduated with, and we saw it at the Easton Eric, and I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was good, but I was feeling that it was like coming up short. It's like Mike was saying, it really was a short movie. There was a lot of anticipation after Star Trek 2 because, the way 2 ended, it was very abrupt. I think when we saw 2, there was a lot of things that were coming out in the newspaper. Somewhere I still have a clipping. They were saying about, Leonard Nimoy was, was not potentially going to die in the film, and it was out. And they kind of teased us at the very beginning of 2 because that whole death scene in the simulator, and it's like, whoa, what just happened? And then he's alive, and then as the movie progresses, you kind of like forget about that until the end comes, and then it's like it just kind of hits you. And it's like the setup with the whole thing where he does the mind meld with McCoy, and it just kind of leads into this. In fact, before I go on more about that, I want to ask you all if you remember seeing this back in the day, and it was Leonard Nimoy's Star Trek Memories. It was probably not. I think it was made in 1983, and it was probably like an hour long. I think it was syndicated. I think it was on Channel 11 out in New York when it was shown. And essentially, he's talking about Star Trek. I mean, he's talking about how everything was, during the series. But of course, he talks a little bit. He says about the movie that's going to be coming out in '84, the summer of '84. Did you see that, Mike or Marybeth and Ross?
I think you sent me the link to it or something. I've seen it in the last few years.
Yeah. I don't remember it at the time.
But honestly, I don't remember the content. You kind of remember the bell. I was a pretty big Star Trek fan in that era, because I was always Star Wars, of course, at the same time. But I kind of came back after Wrath of Khan. I kind of came back around to Star Trek a lot, and that's when so I probably did see it.
Yeah,
but it's not really. I don't remember what he said.
And that was 1983.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
So Wrath of Khan was 82. They greenlit this thing the day after Wrath of Khan came out.
Yeah.
That's what I understood.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have already, in 83, they either had already worked on it or knew it was, because it came out in 84. So they had to either be working on it or had already worked on it. So he knew the deal.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, you remember when after Wrath of Khan, the fans were just like, Spock lives, all that stuff. And, there was a big outrage that they killed him off. And I think they were pretty much, even though Leonard may not have wanted to do it.
Right.
The studio
he loved Star Trek. Leonard loved Star Trek. He just was mad they weren't paying him his royalties and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But he kind of did want it. He did want out, though. I think at that point
he did, but I think he definitely regretted it, and he did. Well, he even told the story too, because if he saying that he wanted to direct the movie, and then he thought everything was going to be greenlit, and then he wasn't hearing back from Michael Eisner at the time, and then he finally.
Oh yeah, Michael Eisner did not believe in the project.
Yeah. And he said that
Harv Bennett. Harv Bennett had to convince Eisner. So
right, and then finally, when that happened, Eisner said, "But I can't let you direct the movie because you don't like Star Trek." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You have it in your contract that you don't want to be, you don't like it, and you don't want to have anything to do with it." And he said, "Go to your, you're in the building." What did he say? He said, "You're in the building where the contract is, where it's at." And he said, check out what it says. He said, there's nothing in there, about me wanting to, not be a part of Star Trek. And,
Well, wasn't there some lawsuit or something because they used his, likeness. Thank you. In a beer commercial. And
they probably did. And then didn't pay him for it.
He didn't see any money for it. I think it was a Heineken commercial or an ad or something. And so he didn't like the fact that they weren't using he wasn't being compensated for his likeness. He didn't really like, I think, what they were doing with Spock in the third season of Star Trek. I'm not really sure about that, but yeah, he wanted to direct this feature, and he had no experience, and I guess he went and hurried up into some TV work to get some experience. And
he wasn't completely novice when he directed this.
So he was hoping that they were going to kill him off there in the second film early, but as they had the discussions and they talked with Nicholas Meyer, he kind of warmed to the idea of the sacrifice that was going to kind of be the climax of the movie, the emotional core of the film. So and then when he finished it, he said, "You know what? I kind of enjoyed that. Like, I'm kind of sorry we killed him off."
Yeah, who actually convinced him to? Because that shot of him touching DeForest and saying "remember" was a pickup.
Yeah. So
You know,
they
it
put
was-
that in there as kind of
So,
right.
yeah,
And
now I'm
out.
like wondering, okay,
Yeah.
who convinced him? You know what? Just film this, just in case. You never know. I mean, we might use it, we might not. Just go ahead and film it. Like
Right.
that's interesting right there. I want to know.
And
what
that's where
happened.
I think
Nicholas Meyer got
they were planning to bring him back, I think, and that was all planned out to do that. And they, so that they would have it when they finally convinced him.
Maybe.
Even with the Genesis planet, I mean, you just the whole, it had to be. It was just handed to them. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a whole back door there to bring Spock back. I mean, especially that was a pickup thing also, though, where they showed the pod on the planet and everything. They made sure that all that was in place.
Made sure to see that coffin on.
Yeah,
You're right.
It was.
Yeah, you know what, Ross? You are right, because Nicholas Meyer objected to that. He objected to the remember, and he objected to that shot of the coffin on the planet. He wanted Spock dead.
Yeah.
Done.
And whoever, I don't know who overrode him. I don't know who at the studio overrode that, but he got overridden.
Well, I think that was all part of the deal too, that he would get to direct. That was all part of him coming back. It was all part of his, that he would get to direct and stuff like that to entice him to come back and do it. And like I think all those actors, kind of pushed Star Trek away at one point because, like most actors, they don't want to be typecast and stuck to one. But I think they all eventually re-embraced it later on, realizing that the impact it had on so many people.
Well, I think the thing we have to remember too is this was like 40 years ago too, and after Star Trek what was it? I think after it was 6 episodes. I think after 6 episodes from the original series, pretty much they weren't getting any type of royalties from the reruns. I mean, the residuals were done. And here's a show that pretty much exploded in syndication. Not that it did poorly, really, when it was being televised, but not to the extent when it went into syndication in the early 70s. And then, you think about all of that, and what were they being compensated for? They weren't getting anything from that. And here the studio is really the ones that were making the money. I remember reading that I think Roddenberry even wanted to try to buy back Star Trek, but I think he couldn't because he didn't have the funds for it. And if he had, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, he did well on his own anyway, but still, I mean, what did it erupted into? Fast forwarding to now, I mean, like literally, or almost at 60 years with,
right.
With
now it's a brand, you know what I mean? Back then, everything was special. It's like, oh my God, no more Star Trek. And everybody would like grasp onto it. And now it's kind of become so big, I mean,
they made their money with the movies. I mean, the movies and the conventions. I mean, that's where they really were really doing well. And fortunately for them, because if you think about it, talking about being typecast, that really not being able to get roles outside. I mean, William Shatner obviously did well with it. Leonard Nimoy did. DeForest Kelley, I think he did maybe only a handful of roles after Star Trek. James Doohan, same thing. I mean, we saw him on
Night of the Lepus.
Yeah,
Jason Star Command.
Jason the Star Command. He was Commander Penarvin.
Was he?
Yeah.
Okay.
But and then Walter Koenig, he had his stuff.
Walter.
Well, Walter had a nice run on Babylon 5.
Yeah, Walter did Babylon.
He did do some stuff. He was really good as Bester.
But
that was probably one of his best roles.
I think this movie, even though we consider it a weaker movie, it still showed the studio that there was a hunger for Star Trek, because it wasn't shortly after that they started to stand up Next Gen.
True.
Right? They started to stand up Next Gen, and they started.
So it was probably in the works. It's funny you say that. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you here.
I know.
I was you're talking about Gene trying to buy back the brand. And, I wonder, because a lot of people think that the first 3 seasons, of Next Gen, everybody was kind of like, it's not that great. And that was when Gene still had a hand in it. Yep. Gene passed, and he was they were pushing Gene out anyway. And then it got a lot better.
Yeah.
So there's an argument there that if Gene had gotten full control of it back, and I'm not trying to say that he doesn't deserve credit for the whole thing. I mean, certainly. But that's always kind of in the back of my mind, is if Gene had lived longer and or he had owned it outright, would we be talking about this stuff?
Would it be different?
Because he didn't want stories with conflict. He wanted everything to be perfect. I mean, at least a lot of the stuff that I've read, it was just to your point, it went into a very different direction. I mean, 3rd season Trek, I mean, the 4th season, it really started just accelerating for Next Generation and just really just flying. And how sad is that, though, if you think about it? And this is kind of you come up with something, you develop, you're a writer, you're artistic, you're creative, you come up with a story, you come up with characters, and obviously you've got a hand in it with the studio and everything, and it does become successful. But then at some point, because it's almost like you're not going in the correct direction with it, or maybe you're mishandling it from the suit's point of view or the studio executives, and you don't have that ownership anymore, and pretty much you get barred. And that's what happened. They didn't want him around the studio when this movie was being made. It was almost like they didn't want him interfering. And it's kind of
hanging out with George Lucas. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
At least George Lucas got his billions, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
But hey, I just want to say hi to some folks that have joined us since we got into our discussion. Lou's joining us from Rhode Island. Welcome,
Hey,
Lou.
Lou.
Thanks for being out there. Randy Lee is joining us from Wisconsin. Welcome, Randy. Good to see you out there. He's saying he's joining us on our way to Boy Scout camp. It's kind of like going to the Genesis planet restricted permits in Manny. Don Bethman is joining us from Delaware. Welcome, Don. Also, James is joining us from Australia. Welcome, James. Good to always see you out
Oh,
there.
hello.
Hello from down under, huh?
And as I was saying, Colin is in the UK. He's saying, I thought this was better than even The Voyage Home. The Whales film just didn't do it for me.
That's another very divisive film in the sense that people either really loved Voyage Home, or they absolutely thought it was not a Star Trek film and it was just a joke. I know our friend Darren of the Trexperts is not a fan of the Whale movie, but like I said, if you want to do that one too, I'm willing, because that was a fun movie. I remember seeing that in the theater. I have more memories of seeing that in the theater the first time than this.
It had laughs.
And I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah.
I think
They wanted something light.
to lighten it up.
Yeah,
because of everything
after
that
two kind of dark movies.
And it was a Star Trek movie that everybody could appreciate. You know what I mean? It's like you didn't have to be a Trekker.
And it poked fun at itself a little bit. And I think that's why some of the more hard
it did.
don't like that.
It did.
Yeah.
And you could watch it. Like this movie, you kind of had to know what happened in Wrath of Khan for some of these things to hit.
I mean,
if you went in blind, it'd be okay, but
they fill you in, but you really need to see Wrath of Khan. It doesn't, I think it's fine. It gets the job done. But like Mike said at the beginning of the show, it just kind of, I think, forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth. It just leans on Wrath of Khan, really,
No, it's a fair point.
Yeah.
And that's what Harv Bennett was trying to go for when he did that summary, because I mean he was a TV guy. I mean, $6 million man. He did a lot of other I mean, that's the one that immediately comes to mind. So he did like the summary of, like last week, as you recall, it was almost like this is what happened, just to kind of give everybody a basis. But really, I mean, if you weren't familiar with Star Trek and you just went into this movie blind, it'd be like, okay, what's going on? But this obviously it was really towards the Trek, the Trekkies or the Trekkers, the Star Trek.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't really understand the whole Genesis planet thing, because they did a little bit of exposition when the Klingons watched it.
Right. And there was no additional development with the sun or anything. You had to know all that stuff from the last movie. And
And even knowing the sun, and let me throw this out to you guys. What do you think? Which hit you harder, David's death or the destruction of the Enterprise? Because I'm going to wager for a lot of viewers out there, the destruction of the Enterprise.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Nobody really liked David because David cheated.
He's like, who is this guy?
I mean, let's just call it out. Nobody really liked David because he was whiny and he cheated and he screwed up. And Savick calls him out on it when she talks and when she finally finds out that he used this proto matter. And she's like, how many people have already died? Look at the destruction that you've done and what is yet to come.
That was an example of Chekhov's. That was an example of Chekhov's gun with that line, because it was basically setting us up for like what else is going to happen, and it's like he was paying the price,
and he's the classic like overweening scientist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's got to be done at all costs. It's like Frankenstein. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
He just does it because he can, and then he doesn't think about the ramifications. Or in Jurassic Park when they put the frog DNA with the dinosaurs.
Just because you could, you didn't think about it.
Exactly.
The problem with all of that is I think it undermines a little, like we're supposed to appreciate that Kirk is having a moment there. Like when he goes to sit back in the chair and he misses and he like sits on the ground. Like we're supposed to be appreciating that moment for Kirk, and you kind of almost don't.
Yeah.
Because you're like, David, we didn't even know who David was. He's upset about it. So I guess we're
That's true. And it's a good point, Marybeth, because we saw so little. I mean, we didn't really bond with him in Wrath of Khan.
Nope.
And we didn't have any time to even
Carol, you know why?
We have nothing invested in David.
We were
other
too
than the
busy
fact that he's a
worried about
cheater.
Carol. Carol was written completely out of this movie. I don't know where she is or what she's doing during this movie. So yeah, it's been very
good point.
It really bothered me that they actually had William Shatner doing the whole summary of the Genesis torpedo, the Genesis device.
Yeah, where was her video? Didn't she make a video?
Yeah, basically what it was in the back of my mind. I'm thinking from a motion picture standpoint, B.B. Besh did not want to be a part of the movie, or they didn't work out a deal with her. So
they didn't want to pay her.
Yeah,
they didn't want to pay her.
There was a lot of that going on.
Yeah. So they basically kept her out with that, and they had him redo the video, which kind of made it kind of like cheesy. It's like, it was such a passion for her. I mean, the character, everything, and I mean, the story was written. I mean, the fact that of what he did, he cheated, like Savick says, like your father, you broke the rules, but that was like a plot device so that they could go in the direction that they were going to do. In the second one, really, I don't think that was being conceived. I mean, Harv Bennett even indicated when he started writing this, one of the first things that he wrote was, "Your name is Jim" at the very end, and then he worked his way backwards and cranked this out within maybe 6 weeks, because they wanted to get this filmed, like you were saying earlier, Marybeth, just so that it's a success. We got to get this going. I mean, think about it. 2 years later, the first Star Trek II premiered June 4th of 1982. This one comes out June 1st of 1984. I mean, it's literally 2 years later. So they didn't waste that time with that.
Quick turnaround.
Nope, they cranked it out.
Roy,
they didn't.
I'm going to say just to point when you said they didn't have the whole proto matter mistake in their heads during Wrath of Khan, which is pretty obvious because when they were inside the asteroid, it would have started having the same problems. It would have started falling apart, right? And apparently it didn't. So that should have gave it away that, we shouldn't probably use it on a planet.
Yeah,
right.
because that's what I feel like they didn't just write out Carol Marcus. They wrote out her Genesis. The Genesis in Wrath of Khan and the Genesis in this movie are almost like two different. They're so different.
They could have at least mentioned her.
Apart, and that one was pretty glorious.
Yeah. They're trying to back out of what they did. Yeah, they could have at least mentioned her if they weren't going to show her likeness. You know what I mean? But yeah, they're trying to save money on her, and they're trying to save money by not paying Kirstie Alley. Yeah. And I mean, that's the whole reason. We'll talk about James.
What was the story with Kirstie?
She wanted more. I remember being at a.
She wanted more than DeForest was getting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is that what it was? She wanted more than DeForest?
Yeah. He's since passed. He did a lot of Star Trek conventions, and somebody asked that question, and he said that pretty much he wanted to be paid more than DeForest Kelley did, and they said no, and she was gone.
Huh.
And this movie introduced her.
I like Robin.
I do too. I mean,
Robin was Robin was actually, I think, a better Savick.
I agree.
I
agree.
And I believe now, and I know we're kind of jumping movies, but in Star Trek VI, Kim Cattrall's was originally supposed to be Savick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Polaris.
Yeah.
They changed the character.
Is she the one that's half Romulan? Is Kim
she was.
Cattrall
That's Valeris's, I think.
She is. You're right, Marybeth. And the other thing is, really, Savick was supposed to be half Romulan, and I think she's half Romulan in the novelization, but it's not brought out.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
movie,
and then they gave it to Kim
Roy.
Cattrall. Yeah.
It was supposed to be. Yeah.
So they took some liberties.
I'm pro Robin anytime.
There were some parallels. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Ross.
There were some parallels. You could tell they were so elated by the success of Wrath of Khan because they really wanted to make the jump to the big screen, and you could just by the very fact that they greenlit this immediately. Okay, after opening weekend, let's go with it. But you can tell with the structure of the thing too. It's like, well, this worked in Wrath of Khan, so let's do this in Search for Spock. we had the whole Khan in Wrath of Khan, and this one we're gonna have Klingon bastards. You killed my son.
Yeah. You killed my son.
I have had enough of you.
Yeah, right.
Hits him in the head.
Here's the thing: is it didn't? I think the reason why we considered a weaker film and it didn't quite, because we had Ricardo Montalban, and he was phenomenal as Khan. And Khan had depth. Christopher Lloyd, who I love and adore, and John LaRoquette, both of who I adore. I think they're, especially Christopher Krug, he was written a little one note. Like he just wasn't written with any depth or any complexity. He just was kind of one note. He just wanted Genesis and that was it. And I think that was a bit of a detraction. I really do. I don't think it, and I love Christopher Lloyd. He did, I think he did a phenomenal job with what was written for him, because I don't think what was written for him was very strong.
He loved doing the role. It's one of his favorites. The other one that I think he was also the villain in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I can't think of the character's name.
Was he really?
Yeah, he was the guy that eventually at the end
now I have to look that up.
And before this, he played Butch Cavendish in the Lone Ranger movie with Clinton Spilsbury, the one that just bombed at the box office.
He'll always be Jim Ignatowski.
Oh, that's right. And sorry, I apologize. In Roger Rabbit, they animated him and they made his eyes really big.
Yeah. Well, he was playing a human, but he was really a toon.
Yeah.
But he'll
That's
always
right. He was
Jim
playing him,
Ignatowski.
he was really tuned, yeah.
What
Like
does a
you
yellow light mean?
Like you're saying, Mike, too, Reverend Jim from Taxi. I mean,
well, that's the thing. This is before Back to the Future, so
right. And what they were afraid of, the studio didn't want to go with him. In fact, they were giving Leonard Nimoy pushback, saying that, well, I think people are going to see him as Reverend Jim, and it's like, Leonard was like, hit the brakes on that. Talk about typecasting. You're talking with somebody who had a fight being typecast, so he really wanted to go with him. The other actor that was under consideration too was Edward
James Olmos. Yes.
Really? No, he would have been good.
Yeah.
I think he
would have been fantastic. They literally thought he was too short. They wanted whoever to be taller than Clerk or whatever. But it kind of worked out because he got spotted by Ronald Moore, and he ended up on BSG. So it all worked out just fine.
Yeah. So when I was watching it the first time, of course I was thinking of Reverend Jim from Taxi, even though I recognized him from multiple movies before that. It was before Back to the Future.
Yeah, he did some work. He was around. I don't know why.
Yeah. I told you I saw him in the Lone
Ranger.
Ranger.
I think that's the one show people remember him before Back to the Future. Christopher Lloyd was synonymous with Reverend Jim.
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
5
it was
years.
like that's where most of the people would that connected together with him. Of course, then he when he became Doc Brown, I think that became his obvious.
And that was the next year, because that came out in '85, Back to the Future. Right. So literally, he made the jump from Trek to that, and
no pun intended.
Yeah.
But another parallel,
and no one knew John LaRoquette, because I don't think
because
I didn't even recognize him.
You could barely recognize him.
He's not recognizable.
Because Night Court was what, late '80s?
No, it was on '83, because I was a senior in high school, so he was on that.
Maybe we had just met him or something.
He was relatively new to Night Court. I think Night Court came out in
what an interesting choice for a Klingon. Like, he's the last person I would have ever cast as a Klingon, but
should have gotten Kelsey Grammer.
I cracked when what does he say? He goes, "You said you were going to kill me," and he goes, "I lied." Drags them off.
Another parallel with Khan, you have the sacrifice of Spock, and they say, well, what can we do in this one to kind of get that same emotional core? And in this one, of course, they sacrifice the Enterprise.
Which to me, I always thought that was kind of a cheap move, because the Enterprise is so easily, I wouldn't say easily replaced, but it is kind of easily replaced, because it just.
Well, they rolled out the Excelsior. We were supposed to.
Here's another ship,
which is just a pregnant Enterprise.
They sacrificed our beloved ship, but they prefaced it with, "Well, it's 20 years old now. We're gonna."
In which that line never makes any sense. That number is wrong.
No,
it's much older than that. It's actually much older than 20 years old.
Yeah, it would be older than 20 years. Yeah.
Plus the fact that they just refurbished it in the first one, so you went through this big refurbishing of the Enterprise.
Why did you refurbish something that you were about to mothball?
Exactly. And they had this brand, they're launching it and it's going out there. It does what it does. And then, there's two, obviously. And then the next movie, it's like, oh, she's old. Time to retire.
Well, it was
So-
already 13 years old during the original series because when
Right.
they do Menagerie, they say this is 13 years ago. And
Yeah.
remember, Pike wasn't the first captain. April was the first
April
captain.
was.
Yes,
So it's
Right.
even older
right.
than that. So it was
You're
like almost 20 years
absolutely
old at the original series.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was another bad plot device. And
But you see-
to Mary Beth's
But
point
it
earlier,
cracks me up that they could get such a simple fact wrong.
Yeah.
Doesn't anybody
No-
research?
No
they
continuity.
didn't know they were going to be dealing with us.
I blame JJ.
But by this time, though, I don't buy that either because the fans were already all
I know.
over everything by this point.
I'll honestly, Mike, that line bothered me too back then. I mean,
It irritated
it bothered me
It
because
still
it's
irritated me today.
because honestly, again, like I just said, Star Trek: The Motion Picture was only 5 years before, and you had this whole refurbishment of everything where it was a relaunch and they were making it grand and it was going to be something spectacular. Why would you be putting this thing into mothballs and just saying, you know what, time to close up shop on it? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I agree with that because it's true. But on the other hand, I think it has less resonance because they did overdo the whole thing, overhauled the whole thing. So it didn't seem like the series ship anymore. I mean, it was.
No, it's very different.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
know,
good
it-
point.
The motion picture Enterprise is much different.
Good point.
right. So
yeah.
it's kind of like there's something they use in philosophy all the time. It's Theseus.
If you replace
ship.
all the boards of the ship, yeah.
Yeah, right. So you replace
use
as
it
it
on
gets
Vision.
replaced. It's like
On
at what
Wonder.
point is it no longer the original ship? Is it
Yeah.
still Theseus'
Yeah,
ship?
you're
It's-
right. You're absolutely right. They destroyed a Enterprise, but they didn't destroy the Enterprise.
Right. So it's like
That's
it's
a great
their ship,
point.
but it
That's a
doesn't
great
feel
point.
like their 60s ship anymore. So they're on it for two adventures and it blows up.
Yeah.
The other thing that bothered me about the whole thing too is in regards to that, it's like, all right, you're dealing with, Kirk asks how many people, how many Klingons are on there. So they said about a dozen officers. So essentially 6 people. I mean, they could have actually had a phaser battle. They could have come up with something. Granted, they lost the power. and
Yeah, because
they
6
had
went over to
options.
the Enterprise.
Yeah. I mean,
Kirk went down to the planet, and that left John LaRoquette and a couple guys, right?
right.
I think when Krug went down, Larroquette was the only one left on the
Oh,
Maltz.
Krug was LaRoquette was alone.
Maltz or whatever his name was is the only one left on the ship.
Dude, him tied him up and taken over that ship.
Yeah, they know. There's like they're all standing on the
Check
bridge
out.
like
What were you
idiots.
guys thinking?
Like somebody
Scotty,
should have
what were you
just jumped
thinking?
them. Yeah.
And why
Right.
did the Klingons beam into the transporter chamber? Why did they just board? Why did they come in that way? Why didn't they just like beam right onto the bridge? You know what I
That's the
mean?
way
It's
the
like
writer wanted
that-
it.
that always bothered me. And Kirk says, "We're energizing transporter now." So what is Kirk saying? Are you beaming the Klingons on, or are the Klingons, coming on themselves? Because it just didn't make any sense. It was just to me, it was like sloppy writing.
Yeah,
with
the
that.
Yeah, it was a little
simultaneous
muddled,
beaming.
wasn't
I thought about that too, watching it for this just recently, and I said to myself, why if Kirk's going to run the transporter to beam them off the Klingon ship to the Enterprise, he could have just beamed them into space.
He could have beamed them into
your landing
space.
party. Oops.
He could have done what Scotty did when they were beaming him up from the planet in Day of the Dove. They could have kept them in transit, and then that would have been the whole, that would have taken care of that whole situation right there. So it's just, I don't know. They took some.
Yeah,
Well, let's face it, there are definite plot holes. Although they did give you a little foreshadowing, and I just caught it for the first time watching it for this just recently. Sorry if you can hear my dog. She's having a dream.
Yeah, I
here.
can hear her.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering what that was.
That's my dog.
She's
She's right
dreaming.
sleeping right there. Anyway, Scotty, when they first get back at the beginning of the movie, when they first get back to space dock, Scotty comes up and he says, "I got it fully automated now," or some line like that. And I never caught it before. I'm like, so that was
Yeah,
they
doesn't he say,
planning
like,
this
two
ahead of
trainees
time
could
before
run
they
it?
even got in, like figuring this is what we're gonna have to steal this thing later.
Yeah, you're
You
right.
could do-
It's perfect foreshadowing of what is to come.
I never caught it before. That wait a minute, you're already planning this thing.
I just want to catch up with some of the comments that are out there. I want to just say hi to Linda. Linda's joining us from Canada. So hi, Linda. And Lou commented and said, "I thoroughly enjoyed it when it premiered. I still like it, but it looks more like a TV movie now."
A little bit.
It does. Yeah, that's
May's
accurate.
also,
Yeah, it
May's
doesn't
also
hold up.
joining us from Canada. Yeah, definitely. It's like a TV movie. Linda also said, "I haven't seen this movie for a long time, and I don't think it was one of my faves, but it did let us recover from the trauma in the movie theater after number 2. because back in those days, bringing back an off character wasn't the norm. Oops, spoiler. Hi to Jack Daly. Jack's joining us. He said, it seems like killing Krug would have had some weight in helping Captain Kirk balance the loss, sort of David. They may not have dealt with the issue until the latter films, but Kirk did get that bit of revenge for the loss.
I suppose he did.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
one more. Jeff Ripple said, yeah,
CRTs.
one more thing. Too many CRT monitors everywhere in the 21st century.
A lot of screens.
Let's see. Walter K is best known for the Star Lost. So for the Canadian,
You have to
folks
say
out there-
that must be Canadian.
yes. Actually, no, I lose from whatchamacallit, Rhode
I was
Island.
gonna say, but always the Canadians always tout
Yeah.
Star Lost like it was a good show.
I did that with Bruce, and let me tell you something. I made the mistake of watching all 16 or 17 of those episodes of Star Lost. Yeah.
It's pretty hard to watch, isn't it? Yeah, pretty hard. Pretty
Hey,
hard. to watch.
Martin.
Okay, it's not that
Martin
bad.
is joining us from New York. He's back from his trip to the UK.
Hey, Martin.
Hey, Martin.
And-
Martin comes to our show too.
Reverend
Yeah,
Jim.
Martin comes to our show all the time.
And Dennis Chevalier's from Canada. I know you guys,
Dennis.
you guys show too.
Dennis.
Dennis is out there. And oh yes, Jack pointed out he wasn't one who flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Absolutely. That's the first time I ever saw him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Christopher Lloyd was?
Yeah. He played one of the inmates.
Nice.
Yeah. And he has an unforgettable face. So, you know.
He does. He really does.
Gavin, thanks for joining us. He's saying there is 12 years between the motion picture and the Wrath of Khan. Okay.
Martin
Yeah,
saying, didn't they kill
in
David?
Star Trek time, it's
Yeah, Star
longer
Trek
than
time.
just a few years.
Oh, okay.
They didn't want Kirk to be
And-
tied down. David was a grown man, so I don't know that it would have tied him down. I mean, they introduced both a Carol and a David, and yet suddenly, poof, everybody disappears. So I don't know.
That was
I don't.
Yeah.
Because
it's-
his one true love in life will always be the Enterprise.
the Enterprise.
Yeah, you know,
I
good.
takes
Bring-
again.
What?
She won't let me have my life.
Bringing Spock back in this also has the effect of making it kind of a religious allegory. You know, there are all these mystical things that they talk about through the movie, and Vulcan mysticism and the religious overtones. But from a a Christian standpoint, that Spock sacrifices himself in Wrath of Khan, dies and is resurrected in this one. The planet's named Genesis. You know, it's just like
Good point.
all the puzzle pieces are kind of there.
Very
it's-
good point.
They didn't
that I had
veil
not.
it very. It's pretty.
Yeah, they did not veil it.
They never do.
It's like
I
there it
can't-
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike Deadpool, who is Marvel Jesus, I don't think Spock
Marvel
is Star Trek
Jesus.
Jesus. I don't think that's quite where they were going with that. But maybe it is. I don't know.
You know what's interesting too? Leonard Nimoy, he was at one of the. In fact, it was the last convention that it was the last time I saw him. He was at a convention in 2008. It was in Jersey. Shari and I actually saw him, and he made the comment that Star Trek really didn't deal with religion or Christianity, and it's like he made that comment, and it just kind of like I was like, okay, but then I thought back to the original series episodes because that's what he was referring to.
Right.
And right away I think of Bread and Circuses with, how
That's the wedding, right?
That was like one of the only times they really hit on it.
Yeah, largely Gene didn't want it.
There
It
was
wasn't until
one
Deep
minor
Space
reference
Nine when they
to- there was
really.
the one minor reference in Dagger of the Mind to a Christmas party.
Dagger of the Mind's another one that dealt with it. That's the other
Yeah.
episode.
And of course, Nimoy brought the Judaism to it with the hand signal.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's
Yeah.
absolutely true.
That is
yeah,
true,
no,
yeah.
Roddenberry didn't want it, so it was really obliquely referred to. And then until we get to Deep Space Nine, when suddenly they're diving in with both feet, like they're just jumping in the deep end, and so but it worked. It worked for Deep Space Nine.
Corbomite maneuver too, because when Baylock says you must have some gods or deities that you
Yep.
worship, you take your whatever, you get so many minutes to whatever
Who mourns-
make your peace.
Who mourns for Adonias? I mean, they dealt with that. He's in regards to worshiping gods, and then
Yeah,
Kirk
that's true.
says, when
But in that sense, they were kind of saying, that
powerful beings
that,
could be
that
fathers.
mankind had moved past that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But but Kirk does reference Christ in Bread and Circuses when he says about, or is saying, they weren't talking about the
so the
Son,
sun. Yeah,
talking about the Son of God. And then Kirk even says, he goes Christ and they had them. What was the line? Something and something, and he goes, Christ, they had them both. And then total brotherhood and loyalty and all that. But to your point, it's not done a lot. But
it wasn't Star Trek 5. I don't even know if I ever made it all the way through that movie. But isn't there like a?
What does God need with a starship? Yes.
Yeah.
What does God need with a starship?
Why would you make a movie that is going to be? You're never going to find God. You're not going to find God. How could you even be in search?
You know what? You know what it reminded me of, Roy, with 5 was it's like they were trying to. I don't know how to put it, but it's like it's like an Indiana Jones movie. It's like, they're looking for that unattainable thing. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's the cup of Christ or the Grail, or, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, we're gonna go find God. You know, then of course they don't really find God. Of course, Indiana Jones always finds what he's looking for. So that was the fail. But yeah, the whole thing we were looking for God was just, and then we didn't even talk about Spock's alleged brother.
And suddenly
that was just miserable.
That opened a can of worms that needs to be shut up so tight again.
And then Kirk even makes the line in that movie. He says, I had a brother once, and then I lost him, but then I got him back. It's like, okay, whatever happened to George Samuel Kirk from Operation
Right, right.
You totally, did the writers forget something? I mean, my God, that was, yeah. Anyway, we'll rip 5 apart some other night.
The fans will get you. It's interesting though, because when I watch these Star Trek movies, I was thinking about it watching Star Trek 3. I don't care. I sit down, I go to the theater, I sit down, I'm just going to watch Star Trek for 2 hours. I don't care what they do, as long as it's entertaining, if it's good. But, it's not like George Lucas, where he obsessively goes back and he would have to alter Savik's appearance. She would be the same through all the films and that's the kind of thing. But they don't even keep the phasers consistent or the effects. When they jump to the warp speed or whatever, it's never
FEMA effects change. Yeah.
It's like, who cares? It's Star Trek. They're telling a story. It's fun.
That's Star Trek's MO, though. Every iteration of Star Trek, it changes.
Yeah,
they change.
And I don't mind that. Yeah,
I think I know it's a great marketing thing, because it's shooting nerds in a barrel. I've said it for years. I got to buy a new comm badge. I got to get the new uniform. I got to buy the new show, new everything. So
Always, Brennan commented. Brennan, thanks for joining us. I think Brennan's joining us from Massachusetts. He wrote, I read the Sun line was controversial with Gene, forced on it by the network, and one of the reasons why he left after the second season. Roddenberry was an unavowed atheist. Oh, there you go. And that was Bread and Circuses, I believe, was shot in the middle of the second season. It was probably right after, I think it was done right after Trouble with Tribbles. So it was probably a middle episode at that time.
I could pull my Star Trek compendium if you really want to know. It's got all the dates.
Honestly, I think it's episode 43, 44. I'm not 100% sure, but that's the nerd in me coming out. So there you go.
Don't make me go get my book.
Oh, go get it.
We're behind me in this mess. All right.
Even if I'm off, I don't care. It'll just be for the fun of it.
I also, the Enterprise is also, in addition to just being a sacrifice and supposed to have this emotional resonance, is a little bit of a metaphoric significance too, because no matter how old it is, there you go. Roy was all ready for this. Whether it was 20 years old or whether it was however old, it has that, it's kind of the heart of it's not like the heart like Spock, but so much nostalgia associated with it.
Yes.
So it becomes kind of a symbol of the aging cast, of the original series. I mean, they weren't even that old, really. I mean, they were, but when I look at them in comparison to how old we are now, it's like we're going to be the movie cast. They're
looking really young in those earlier movies. It's funny as time goes on. It's like, gee, you guys are revitalizing. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, but I have to say about the costumes, and I'm digressing. I think the costumes, even though in the television show they're very 1960s, it kind of aged better than the costumes in the movies. Personally, I just feel like they're very 80s rock video when they give them those. Yeah,
I don't mind Monster Maroon, but in the motion picture, I despise the pajamas.
Oh yeah, me too.
Did not care for those really.
I really liked Admiral Kirk's uniform.
The uniforms were awful.
Yeah.
That was probably the only
Pajamas.
one I liked. I didn't like the one that was like a one piece.
So-
I thought
Yeah,
the
that
one
was
that-
the
Yeah,
motion picture.
yeah, that was that
I,
was.
I
what
liked
was his
Monster
name?
Maroon. I was okay with Monster Maroon. That was
Monster
fine.
Maroon were great. You know, it's funny. I had asked, I think, Mike Okuda about the uniforms once, and he kind of sighed and he said, "Well, you know," he's like, "a lot of things look better on paper, you know, when they're drawing it out." Then he's like, "So I think they probably, when they did the pajama uniforms, you know, they look better in the artist drawing till they actually made them, and they're
Probably
like,
did,
well, this is
yeah.
what we got." Because remember,
And
that
to be-
movie was fast. They put
It
that
was.
together extremely fast.
Yeah.
And to be
So-
fair,
because
that movie was 10 years after they had done the original series, and not for anything, you know what? They were older. I mean, they were not in their, they weren't in their early 30s or their mid 30s. I mean, they were in their 40s, and it's unless you're really constantly working out, and you're not. There's only certain things you can try to cheat. I mean, some people are fortunate. I mean, DeForest Kelly always looks like a stick. Leonard Nimoy always looked like a stick.
Well, yeah,
Unfortunately,
and Shatner had his girdle.
D
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But it's funny because I also asked Mike, I said, why in Next Gen did they change the colors? Why did Command become red and engineering or operations become gold? And his simple answer was, he goes, that was basically made on the complexion of the actors. What colors work better for their skin tones? That was the reason he gave me, whether you believe it or not. So
I
bread
think
and circuses,
actually, what's that?
you want to know bread and circuses? I
Sure.
looked it up.
Oh, geez.
Well, you asked me to. So that was episode 43.
Yes.
It's good call. First draft was 5/2/67. Final draft was 9/12/67, and filmed on September of 1967.
Wow. So 57 years ago coming up. That's crazy.
Is that what you had him look up?
Yeah, I asked him about what episode number it was.
I've had this since I was a kid.
Mike, I remember the day I got mine.
This is
And
like the original.
That's the first one.
That's that.
Alan Ashman, who sadly passed away
1981.
last year. I
I'm that old, folks. I'm that
I
old.
guess I did Walden Books, Ross, the one that was in Palmer Township, and I was up all night going through that thing. And in fact, there's a really cool shot of the communicator, the working communicator. When they're talking about the episode Patterns of Force, if you check it out in the book, you'll see it in there. It's
See, before social media,
Yeah,
it's
no,
people,
this
it's people like Roy.
this
that-
Memorize
was like-
facts.
This was like this
Impress
was for
our
years.
friends.
This was like my Bible.
It was.
It's.
And
I have
what
to be
was-
careful with it because it's so worn. I'm afraid the pages are
We
going to
should
start falling
we
out of
should
it.
all probably give tours with one of those under our arm.
Right.
There's
And what's
so
so
many times
cool-
during the tour when I'm like, and that's from
Well, you can
it's
still
episode
get.
of
I
Girl,
think
that
they still
thing.
make this a modern version of it. It's just expanded to other. Star
And what's
Trek.
nice about the one that you're holding there, it actually gives you the first draft, the second draft dates, the revised versions, because there's a red book, there's a black one, there's a white one that came out. It doesn't have those anecdotes in there. So that one is like that's like the holy grail of the compendium. Mine actually did tear in half because I wore the heck out of it, and then I got another copy and I kind of like taped the binding, but he did a great job with that. And I interviewed him on the show last year. And again, sadly, he passed away last year. But what he did was he did everything when he did his research. It was, there was no computers like Ross was just saying. I mean, it was basically from the articles. He would watch the episodes. He would write down all the information, and it was just painstaking. But really, really heck of a nice guy. It was quite a loss. But
I'm still buying Star Trek books, so I have the Cerritos Tech Guide that came out a few months back, and I even have Dayton Ward's Kirk Fu.
nice.
I have Dayton Ward's Kirk Fu.
I gotta
need
get him
Dayton
to
to
sign
sign
it
it.
next time he comes out. So
Did you guys know about the Search for Spock, Where's Waldo parody? Do you know about this book?
Oh.
no, I've
It's-
not seen
it's
that.
Rob Perlman. Because I had this idea, when I tease these things on my Facebook page, I thought, I should do a mock up. I should do a mock up of where's Spock kind of thing, because it's the Search for Spock. And somebody already did it. They took my $1 million idea. It was published in 2017. Rob Perlman is the guy, and it's called In Search of. Not In Search Of. It's called Search for Spock. I'm thinking of course, ironically, Nimoy did that series
Right.
In Search Of.
Yeah, In
I used
Search
to
Of.
love that show. That was such a great after Saturday,
It
like
was a
was.
great
after
show.
school thing. I used to
Cool.
watch that all the
I used to
time.
watch it too.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Sure. So, about the Enterprise, going back to that. So anyway, looking back now, the Enterprise, it has another layer, a metaphor for me personally, because that was my senior summer after graduating from high school. That was my American Graffiti summer. So nothing was the same after the summer of '84. You know what I mean? You start to, take on more responsibilities. You lose touch with your friends, and it's no longer what it was. And so kind of the destruction of the Enterprise, it kind of becomes a symbol now of the destruction of my youth.
Destruction of your youth and innocence.
It's my last
Aw.
summer,
I want to touch upon what Marybeth was talking about earlier, though, because when that happens and they start, I mean, it was a nice nod to let that be your last battlefield, where they did the self-destruct code, and they went through and they had the same, codes, only it was what was it? It was Kirk, Scotty, and Chekhov, because Spock wasn't there.
Mhm.
And they did it, and they went from 30 seconds to 60 seconds. But when they beam off of there, and then Krug's crew's on there, and they take out only 6 Klingons, which just drives me crazy. But when you see it blow up, and there was some slides I wanted to show. So they're doing this whole thing with the destruction, and it's like it's like your heart is going, and then when you see that, it was like, oh my god,
It's like glass breaking, though. They literally had the sound of glass breaking.
Yeah, it was like the Enterprise was being shattered, and the fact that the way they just destroyed the NCC 1701, and then that scene where it's burning up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, Marybeth is right, though. That scene where they're standing there on the cliff, like watching it go down, is still great.
Yeah, that was good.
It is, it is. But again, even back then, I remember watching it and going, "This doesn't make any sense. Why would you have a self-destruct that just kind of blows up part of it? Had it not been near a planet, it would have been still floating around, mostly intact.
It has to be.
It should have a warp core overload, and bam, the whole thing is just incinerated.
There was a reason for that, though, Mike. What happened was
Viking funeral.
Yeah. I understand why they did it. I just said it doesn't make any sense to me.
No, you're absolutely right, though, because originally what happened was they were supposed. That's exactly what would have happened. It would have been the engines blowing up, and it wouldn't have been from the primary hull. It would have been from the secondary hull, and then they went back and they did something with the editing and everything. But I don't know, just the whole. It was just an emotional moment. To your point earlier, Marybeth, I was more upset about that than David being, killed. And I was upset about David. I didn't want to see him die. Well, and Shatner really sells it too with the chair. I mean, when he falls back like that, I mean, cleared the set when they did that scene too, because Nimoy really wanted him to be vulnerable. And he even says when he's being interviewed that, they were like yelling at each other, going back and forth. He's like, we're throwing things at each other. And then, we filmed it, and he said he was able to capture that, and it really worked. But
he did David's death better than his own.
Yeah.
That, you know what, Rizzo? You're right.
That's a good point.
I haven't seen that movie either.
Well, it's funny because Shatner never
never
liked his performance in Generations, how he died. Yeah. In fact, I think it was it one of the late night talk show was interviewing, I forget which one it was, and said, "Okay, you want to do it was Kimmler, do it again." And Shatner redid the scene, and it was much better. Like his whole "oh my," it's like when he dies. So if you can look that up on YouTube, if you're curious to see it.
Was that with Conan?
Maybe it was Conan. Yeah, it was one of the late night guys. I can't remember which one.
I saw that recently. It's funny you're mentioning that. And yeah, it was less over the top. It was just more, I don't know, more realistic, I think.
Jeff Rubel is explaining the
I guess he said he felt when he did that scene initially, he was thinking like it was the shock of like, I'm really gonna die. Like that was the oh my, and it didn't come across, as he wanted it to be.
Oh, so. James is saying it was Jimmy Kimmel.
It was Jimmy Kimmel. Okay.
Thanks, James.
What's your take on the quote that they invert in this movie? The needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. or outweighs the needs of the many.
Mm.
How do you feel about
I think what they're going is that, that we all know that it's that don't leave anybody behind theory. You know what I'm saying? That
Right.
in Men in War or your family, that you will sacrifice more people to save one person, even though we all know that that's not really the logical thing to do, but in your heart you do it because you feel you can't leave somebody behind.
Exactly.
So, and I think it completely fits in this instant as well. You know what I'm saying? This, it's not a logical, you're right, it's not a logical decision. It's one from the heart.
That's a line that's actually in Star Trek 4 when Spock is talking to Amanda. They're having the discussion where he's essentially going through and he's kind of re-educating himself, and he I think the computer says, how do you feel? And he can't answer it. And then what happens is she starts talking to him and tells him that his friends did the ultimate sacrifice. And he's like, to your point, he said it's not logical, and she's, but it's from the heart. It's what is important. And they, because of him being who he was. And Sarek in the third movie, at the end of the third movie, even says to Kirk, everything that you've sacrificed. And Kirk says to him, he goes, if I didn't, he said, I would have given up my soul because of, his friendship for Spock. He had to give everything because
even Sarek admits when the woman comes down and he wants to perform this ceremony to merge them back together.
Right.
And
he says, my logic
is not logical. And he's like, forgive me. I'm only thinking of my son.
Yeah. My logic isn't, when it comes to my son, my logic isn't.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So,
side note, great to see Mark Leonard again.
Yes.
I love Mark
Leonard.
Leonard.
Seen him for a hot minute. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that
He
character.
was looking good. He was maybe a little bit angry for Vulcan, but hey, his son was.
He always was, though. That was Sarek.
Yeah.
That was Sarek. He was always kind of just, which it's so funny because we know that Vulcans have emotion, they just suppress them, and we kept seeing him, especially in Journey to Babel.
Right.
Yeah.
He was being stubborn. What I'm saying, and it's like, and then of course, when we get to the Next Generation episodes, he has this problem where he can't control himself. So,
yeah.
Interesting tidbit. He was actually the first actor that I had met from the Star Trek series. There was a creation, and actually it was the first convention I had ever attended. I was 20. It was in where was it? It was down by New Brunswick, near Rutgers, where Joe went to school. Ross's cousin Joe, and it was a small convention there. But what happened was I was getting there a little late, and when I went into the elevator, he was in the elevator, and I was trying so hard not to act like a freaking nerd and act like like a fanboy, and I just looked at him, and as I'm looking at him, he's looking at me like, I know you know who I am, and then I just was like, hi, how you doing? And he looks at me, he goes, hello. He goes, how you doing? I said, I'm doing good. And then I it's that awkward moment. You're in a freaking elevator, and it's like, so I'm like, so you're gonna be in New York for a while? And it's like, he's probably thinking, how would you know I'm gonna be in New York, or why would you think I'm being in New York? And then he's like, well, I'm gonna be in the area. And then of course, then I hit him with, would it be okay to get your autograph? And he said, well, I'm going to be signing autographs later. And I said, oh, no, that's fine. And I said, very nice to meet you. And he was very, very nice. But it was just like, I was like so awkward because, again, that was like the first time I had ever met somebody, with the exception of like Larry Holmes. My dad is a huge boxing fan. And Larry Holmes is from Easton, PA. And, we ran into him, at a restaurant one time. But outside of that,
I think everybody got Larry Holmes's autograph at some point.
He was at the Space 19 when we did the Space 1999 convention.
What year was that, Roy? Do you remember?
With what? Mark Leonard?
Yeah.
It was in 1986.
So that's interesting because that he would even be like, he wouldn't just sign something for you, because the point I'm getting to is I saw George at a convention in New Haven, Connecticut years back in the late 80s. Next Gen had already been, because I know we had already seen I remember seeing the ship. It hadn't been out yet, but it must have been like 86, I'm gonna guess. And George was just signing. I mean, you just got online.
Yeah.
And he just signed whatever, what I'm saying? There was no charge back then. So I thought it was interesting that, because I don't think they got on the charge bandwagon until like the 90s.
No, I think he was. I think what it was is I don't think it was about the money. I think it was just that he was on his way and he just didn't. It was just kind of like he was
He's
just kind of like
get away from me, kid.
it was probably-
Go away, kid, you bother me.
You bother me.
you bother me.
Let me
Oh,
guess.
that's
You
funny.
like Star Trek.
Yeah. Let me guess.
Aren't you Mr. Spock?
Was that Star Wars? Wasn't that James?
That
Earl
was
Jones?
James Earl Jones on
me
Big
guess.
Bang Theory when he
You-
sees Sheldon. Let me guess. You like
Oh.
Star Wars.
But no, and it's funny you're saying about that too, Mike, because they did Creation used to do this big event. It was around Thanksgiving. They would do like a 3-day event, and they would do it at the Penta Hotel in New York City. Majel was there, and she had the Bible from Star Trek: The Next Generation, and she was talking about what the series was gonna potentially be, and was reading like some excerpts from it, and she was saying she was gonna tell Gene the audience reaction, and it was kind of cool with that, but it's so long ago though. It's crazy when you think about the
I just
time.
remember all the rumors that were coming out. I know we're off topic, but about next gen that time in those conventions, and people like, oh, it's gonna do like warp 900 or 99 or some ridiculous numbers, and the new Enterprise and all this stuff, and I saw that. Even I've never been a fan of the D. I didn't like it when I first saw it. I still don't really care for it. It's not my favorite by any means of Enterprise.
I like it.
It's like, no, it's the fat one. I think they even said it in Picard.
It is the fat one. Yeah.
Nobody likes the fat one.
Nobody likes the fat one. I like the fat one. It's like a big
I like-
cruise ship. It's very
I'm
comfortable,
sorry,
well appointed.
It's 17.
Every
The original
amenity.
1701 from the original series is always going to be my.
Not
my
like run
favorite.
around the Defiant. The Defiant barely
Defiant's a
had
good ship,
slabs
yeah.
to lay on.
And I love it. It's been controversial. NX-01 is my second favorite.
Yeah, you do like the NX-01, yeah.
I never liked the Excelsior. I always felt that was the
No, it's a bad design. No, I don't like it either. You're right. It looks like a
Yeah.
pregnant Enterprise.
But they didn't use it for anything. Like they didn't really use it for
Oh,
anything.
Sulu had it, obviously. Fly upon
Oh,
then.
Sulu ran around
Yeah.
that thing for a while.
Yeah, Sulu
What
was
was the
captain.
other ship they introduced? Esteban was the captain of the Grisham? No, not the Grisham.
Yeah.
What was the other ship they introduced?
Well, the Grissom was the science ship, and then
Yeah.
in the movies, you mean, or just in general? Like,
No, in this movie, what other ship did they introduce in this movie?
just
They had-
there's only the three we ever see.
The one that gets
Grissom
blown
is-
up.
Oh, didn't they refit the Klingon? Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, they introduced Esteban had some ship, but the Klingon, that ship was originally going to be the Klingon stole a Romulan ship.
Yeah.
And then at the last minute they decided no, but they had already
Again?
painted on like the bird of prey stuff or something. I don't know what they were
So,
doing. Like that got very muddled.
I have
And that's
another
a good
point. The bird of
Go
prey
ahead.
also doesn't jive from 3 to 4. Because
is it?
this is the bird of prey, the Klingon
Yeah.
ship. Because you
Klingon.
go, of course, because well, we should call it the Bounty, which is what they eventually renamed it.
What-
If you
yeah,
remember.
it's the bounty.
But it was like, okay, so you had a ship that's a crew of 12, which is, so you're talking a pretty small ship, scout ship. Yet Scotty was able to convert the cargo bay to hold 2 humpback whales and the
Yeah.
water to support them in that. That never made any sense to me either.
That
No,
used to be Fifi Rebozo's dog park.
Yeah.
Just converted it.
Oh, that's funny. Marissa, that's a really good point. I never really thought about it. I was too busy laughing at them landing in the park and it's cloaked and they're like, remember where we parked?
I
And
mean,
then-
don't get me wrong. I love 4. I love Voyage Home because of all the
weight
jokes.
alone, they should have been able to take off between the humpback whales as well as all the water that was in that
Yeah.
cargo bay. There's no way. I mean, and the ship was redesigned when they, it went from 3 to 4. And the other thing is, now granted, there was that whole thing where the Romulans and the Klingons, I mean, they brought it out in, what was it, the Enterprise incident?
Yeah, that was just to save money.
Yeah, of course. And, the Romulan ship is always referred to as a bird of prey, but it's,
The Klingons absorbed the bird of prey terminology.
Yeah,
But
the
for that
Klingons.
model, I think it's
Yeah.
only for that size ship, though. I think the regular, like the D7 and the larger cruise, they don't call them bird of prey. It's
Yeah,
only the little
Maybe they're
ones.
raptors or something.
Because
Yeah,
the
I don't
arms
know.
kind
They-
of, the wings do its little flappy thing.
Yeah, yeah. But that was a bit of a redesign, I think, for that ship, or they couldn't decide what they were doing with that ship. But there were a couple ships kind of introduced in this movie that stuck with us for a while. So
Yeah.
Now, are you guys
we
old
never
enough?
saw the Grissom again or that model in anything. I don't. Well, no, maybe next gen.
Next gen had the
Next gen
Grissom.
might have used it. Yeah.
They did.
what were you saying,
What did you say,
Ross?
I didn't know if you guys are old enough that you would have recognized James B. Sicking from Hill Street Blues. That he was
He played the captain.
Played the captain. Was on the.
I'm not old enough.
on
Another
the
Easter
cargo
egg.
ship?
Very nice.
What were her name? Valkyris?
Was it
No.
the Excelsior? Right? Wasn't
The
it?
Excelsior captain.
Oh, you're talking about
Yeah.
yes. I'm sorry, wrong captain.
And,
yeah,
and I
you're right. Yes.
and I didn't notice.
Just out of sheer curiosity, why did they decide to chase them out? Like, why didn't they just put a tractor beam on them when they were still inside the mushroom space dock?
Who can
So
say?
they could get away.
Because we needed it for the movie to happen.
We could maybe assume that Scotty disabled that when he opened the space doors. You know, whatever he was doing, that he somehow was able to override a lot of their systems. I'm just throwing that out there as an
Or
explanation.
maybe
There's that
maybe
captain.
that's another thing that he sabotaged when he was over there too. And you could always say that. Do you remember the actor Jose Ferrer?
Oh yeah. Miguel Ferrer is his son.
Miguel Ferrer is his son, and he played the navigator in the
Jose Ferrer. Jose Ferrer, Cyrano de Bergerac.
Yes.
Jose.
Yes.
Yeah, this is his son. Yeah, he was in Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
Miguel.
he was actually a close friend of Bill Mooney's. Sadly, he's passed away, though. I think he passed away of cancer not some time ago.
Yeah, I didn't recognize him in the movie. I didn't see him in the movie, but I read that he was in it. Yeah.
He's in the third photo there.
Yeah. I don't think he was known yet at the time. You know, he hadn't been in bigger roles. Yeah.
I really cracked me up too, and I'm not sure what the purpose of otherwise being a prop, but the captain, he was always carrying around that stick, and it reminded me of yeah. Do you remember in Battlestar Galactica? Now I'm going back to the original. Commander Kane, he was always walking around with his. It reminded me of that.
I think that was a thing. Like I think they ripped off from Patton.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah. What do they call that? The
riding crop.
The name for that. Yeah, but there's an actual name for it, like
It's
a
an
glory
affectation.
or
Yeah.
It is like a riding crop, but.
But yeah, that definitely came from.
It's a swagger stick, is what it's called.
Swagger stick.
Yeah. I couldn't remember.
Stick.
Yeah.
Brennan said, I think the Romulans were originally supposed to be the villains, but got changed to Klingons last minute by the studio because they were more well known. Yeah, I think you're right about that.
But you know,
Brennan, I think
the
you're right,
Romulans probably would have made a little more sense. You know, being more, especially since the Klingon. I don't know, but either one works.
Yeah,
I do want to send a shout out to Dame Judith Anderson, who played the priestess. What was her name?
Yes.
Tlar. Because she's a classic movie actress that has been around since at least the 40s. She was in Rebecca, Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, played Mrs. Danvers. It's like her most memorable thing. But you see her every year on the Ten Commandments also. There she is. She's probably standing there too, isn't she?
She was only like 4'8".
Yeah, she's supposed to be 4'8", but she always said she was 5'2". But they gave her like elevator boots, and she was still 5'4" or something. But
I mean, we've met Robin. Robin is tiny, and look at where Robin is. We've met Nichelle too. We've met
she's
Walter,
probably sitting there.
Hey, Henry.
No, she's definitely sitting down.
Yeah,
she has to be sitting.
One of the most imposing actresses. When you watch the Ten Commandments, they show that every year. She plays Memnet in the Ten Commandments. But she apparently she was in a TV broadcast of Hamlet. Or not Hamlet, Lady Macbeth, and she played opposite Maurice Evans, Dr. Zaius. Could you imagine Dr. Zaius and Tlar in Macbeth?
That's interesting. Yeah, Henry
something. I wonder if anybody ever.
That's an interesting combination.
I need to go watch that now just to see. Like,
I'm gonna look.
Seeing that picture, it just made me think. Nichelle was barely in this film.
It was a real big disappointment. it was a
She
disappointment.
stayed back at the whatever at Starfleet with the kid in the closet
When she
there.
caught up with them, she catches up with them on Vulcan. But I mean, no.
That was a letdown.
Yeah, I don't know why they decided to just remove her from the
And
crew
that was
there.
weird
Like,
because this cast for a long time was everyone or no one cast. Remember during the animated series, they were like either everyone gets a part or no one's getting a
I mean,
part.
she was in the movie, but she just didn't. She just wasn't.
Yeah,
I don't know what the deal was.
I read that she was upset about that too. Until then, she really liked her scene, where she does the whole thing with Mr. Adventure. But no, that was a letdown because it's like for a good portion of the film, you don't get to see her until the very end. And there's a nice moment though between Kirk and her. He gives her a hug, and it was a nice warm exchange that that they did. I thought that was nice. Hey, Henry's out there. Henry, thanks for joining. Good to see you out there.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, she played Mammoth in 10 Commandments.
Right, exactly. And she was in.
You know what else we didn't talk about is the weird little detour this movie makes to this bar where there's this guy. Like, what was that all about?
Star Trek, I think, is at its worst when it tries to be Star Wars. Because they do pretty well, but whenever they try to be Star Wars, it kind of falls flat. Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
there's a next gen thing where they have a weird bar and it falls flat. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, that dude is weird.
And you know what's interesting about that? That whole scene with him and the I'll say the waitress, that was Dean Cain's mom, if you remember from Superman. Lois and Clark: The Adventures of Superman.
Yeah,
the actress or his actual mom.
That was his real life mom that played that waitress. Believe it or
not. The only reason I think they put that scene in is because it made them. It led to the scene where they had to break him out of the jail.
Yep.
Yeah.
Otherwise he had no reason to be in jail. So they needed that scene to put him in jail so they could break him out. And
there was supposed to be a barroom brawl that was supposed to take place, which would have been appropriate since they actually showed tribbles in that bar, because it was almost like a nod to the trouble with tribbles, so to speak. But then what happened was Nimoy, I think, felt that the scene wasn't working, and then they decided to just not go with that. They just changed it where he's trying to give the security guard, I guess.
I mean, it was kind of funny when he tried to Vulcan pinch the guy. The guys were looking at him like, "What the hell are you doing?" Yeah, it had some merit. It wasn't a total loss. I think DeForest pulled it out.
Later on, it gives to George the chance to say, "Don't call me tiny" and all that part later when they go get him. But I don't know. It just, to me, I had a moment of like, wait, what are we doing? Why is this happening?
But that scene was so awkward to me because I'm like, why was this guard so quickly angry with just a comment about keeping you busy as he's like, why would anybody get that upset? Like he's going to beat him up over that. It's like, it wasn't even that derogatory. It was just kind of like, keeping you busy. It's kind of tired. Like, and he's like, don't get smart with me, Tiny. Like, okay, you're just a bully of a security guard, apparently.
Bully guard, yeah.
Anyway, so this kind of awkward.
Henry said in the novelization, they detail Uhura's escape from Starfleet headquarters and racing authorities to the gate of Vulcan embassy where Sarek gives her sanctuary. See, that would have been a kind of cool scene to have had in that if they.
Henry, she had more to do, didn't she? Didn't she helped him escape or something by jamming frequencies or something? I don't know.
See, that would have made sense when you talked about like say tractor beams and stuff that she was sitting there behind the scenes, undermining their efforts to stop them.
Yeah.
So, and let's not forget about the one cameo, which I thought was a nice nod.
For Grace, yeah.
For Grace.
Grace Lee, there she is. Okay, that's it.
What, she got the one, of course, she was beaming the poor Vulcan aboard on the motion picture.
Yeah.
Well, didn't live long. Yeah.
There's a whole backstory about that, and she writes about in her autobiography, and it's kind of sad because it's almost like she could have had a bigger part, but I think not to go down a negative path, but it seemed like there was some where she indicated, at least from her perception, from what she wrote, that there was like some friction, I guess, between her and Robert Wise.
Well, she had a rough start with Star Trek to begin with, so
had a rough go.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So she's just you don't know what was going through her head to begin with,
Exactly, but I mean, at least they gave her the opportunities, and it was nice to see her, especially that moment where the Enterprise is coming in, and it's she's seeing the damage to it, and it's like the Enterprise is coming home, and it was a nice warm moment that they worked into the picture for this, which I thought was really good.
Let's see your pictures. Let's see if it jogs anything.
No, the one officer at the beginning that goes to Kirk, are they gonna have a reception for us? And he says, you got to. He's been in a bunch of stuff in Star Trek.
He has.
Well, that's Phil Morris, and he was I wrote once.
Right. That's where he do Next Gen stuff too, and maybe even
he did Deep Space Nine. His father is Greg Morris, who was on Mission Impossible.
Right.
Shot directly at Desilu while they were shooting Star Trek, so they were literally right next door. And then I don't know if you ever saw the revamped series of Mission Impossible. It came out in the 80s. It was like the new show, and it was on for 2 seasons. And what he did was he took his father's place. He was playing Grant Collier instead of Barney Collier. But that was that connection. And then this is really cool. I came across this. The guy that actually kills David, he was a stuntman. His name was David Cadenti. He actually was in an original series episode, and he played a Starfleet officer, and he was one of the members of the crew that was at the ceremony where they were essentially remembering Kirk because they think he's deceased when the Tholian in the Tholian web. And he's the same guy that actually is in this movie playing the Klingon. That
interesting.
Ultimately took him out. Yeah. So I thought that was a fun fact.
Yeah, that's a great find.
So that's that one. And what else? Oh, back in the day, I always like to give Starlog magazine a nod because that's all we had, as Ross was saying. So Starlog issue number 82 featured Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, and it actually has Christopher Lloyd on the cover for Krug. So for any of you Starlog folks out there, you can definitely check it out. Starlog you can find too available on eBay. I mean, it's possible to get, or if you go to a convention, there's folks that are selling that. So
injuries nearly killed Conan.
More Jedi special effects secrets, and David Gerald, Why I Can't Write. Doctor Who and Ice Pirates.
Ice Pirates. Oh God, yeah.
I remember seeing that movie. That came out in '84.
We did it on our show.
We did it.
It has merit. It's not all bad.
It's mostly bad.
Yeah,
it's good bad though.
It is a very good bad.
I mean, it's come on. They coined the phrase "space herpes."
There you go.
Yeah. They did coin that phrase.
Exactly.
But I guess we can start to wind down. One thing I want to do, one thing we do is we do That's the Way It Was. So That's the Way It Was, but release date June 1st, 1984. Some tidbits of information. The US #1 song was Let's Hear It for the Boy, Denise Williams. And then also the UK #1 song was Wake Me Up Before You Go from Wham. Movies that were playing that year in June '84, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, obviously. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, not a favorite. Gremlins, and of course, Ghostbusters. And the #1 film at that time was Ghostbusters.
I think Temple of Doom doesn't get enough love. I don't think it's as bad as everybody.
It's better than what came out last year. Or was that the year before?
That's funny. Well, the Crystal Skull was awful. I didn't think the last one was that bad.
Yeah. Well, we could do a whole show on this.
Yeah, we really.
I mean,
could.
compared to is it the original or even the third one there? No, absolutely not. But I think Temple of Doom had its merits.
I'll take Temple of Doom over the last one, and I could see where you could say that's probably even better than what was it? Crystal? What was it called? Crystal Skull.
It's way better than the Crystal Skull. It was terrible.
Yeah, but I'm not a fan of that movie.
Yeah, for me, it would be 1, 3, 2 probably, and then Crystal Skull, and then the last one. I just don't even believe it even came out. I just pretend it didn't come out.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
I think it was that bad. I don't know.
You should have just ended it in the 80s.
I agree that it probably shouldn't have been made, but it wasn't. I wasn't like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I thought it was better than Crystal Skull.
It was the worst thing I saw that year.
Today it's not hard to do though. There's so many bad.
That's the only thing you saw in the
There's
theater.
just so many bad films.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt's saying as the sun. Oops, I'm trying to get it up here. As the sun sets here in Philadelphia, I'm about to don my Spock hooded terry cloth robe and break out my sweaters. Oh my god, Matt. Matt. Anyway, the director of this film we've talked about, obviously Leonard Nimoy. And think about it. I mean, this is what really blows my mind. And this is something I love talking about on the show specifically. It was only, and I use the word only, but it was only 20 years from when he did Star Trek The Cage as a pilot into this making of this movie. It's just like 20 years then seemed like
it seems so much longer.
And
It
now
does.
It's today.
right? It's crazy. But when you think about all of his accomplishments and everything that he did in between that time frame, and that part of that being the original series, he had the 2 years that he was on Mission Impossible. We talked about In Search Of. He did some TV movies. He did Invasion of the Body Snatchers that came out in '78. And then he did, the Star Trek, the motion picture. And then pretty much coming into Star Trek, 2 and 3. But also he was a writer. He was a poet. Bonnie Moss had her on the show. She was up at the set tour. She's the gatekeeper of anything Leonard Nimoy. And it's just amazing, how talented he was and how artistic he was, and really just an incredible human being. So when you think about the character and everything that he came up with that resonates around Spock, I mean, it really truly is. I mean, it's the epiphany of Star Trek.
He had a lot of integrity, because even when, he was having those problems, when it came to Spock, he always did such a good job. You know what I mean? He never did a half-assed job with Spock.
Yeah,
No.
good
And
point.
that's what
They said whenever he was in makeup, he was in Spock.
Yeah.
He was the crew used to try to make him laugh.
Marybeth brought up a comment about the how they all banded together, and you were saying about the animated series. Really, though, it was Leonard Nimoy who said that, because what they weren't going to do is, I don't think they were going to have George, and I don't think they were going to have Nichelle because of the budget. And what he said was, unless you have them be a part of this, I'm not doing it. And then what happened was they were able to bring them on, and unfortunately Walter didn't do it, but he did write the Infinite Balkan, the one episode.
Yes.
So at least there was that kind of tie-in. But really, for him as an actor to stand up, behind his peers like that, to your point, Ross, I mean, that's, it shows the integrity of, how he really resonated with them as a human being.
I've said this on our show, and I've always said that they should take the audio track from animated series, strip off the music, keep the voice, redo the animation, and put the original series music back in it.
Yeah.
And then modernize the animation, and that would sell like hotcakes. I would buy it.
You're right. You're
Absolutely.
absolutely right.
Great idea. That's an awesome idea.
I mean,
that
I
always
don't know why
bothered.
nobody saw it. I know there's all kinds of copyright and stuff, but I mean, you can't tell me they can't work that through.
They could do it. They could definitely do it.
It would
There's
sell.
something out there that I caught on I don't know if it was on YouTube or something. Somebody did something like a nod to the animated series. It was, I'd have to delve in. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Did Lower Decks do that nod? Because no. Rizzo,
No.
remember, it was all those little shorts that were actually awful. Do you remember recently?
Yeah, somebody did.
Did
something.
you know?
Sure, it wasn't Lower Decks that kind of did a thing with it, or was it that
There were a bunch of animated shorts, and we collectively all went, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah. No, it wasn't Lower Decks. I'll find it and I'll send it to you guys. I have to dig it up. I thought it was interesting that somebody it's amazing that the time and effort people put into different projects. It's pretty cool, but obviously to do something like that, I'm sure it would be jumping over the copyright hurdles.
Yeah, well, you'd have to get the Courage still owns the Courage family, I believe, still owns the copyright to the music.
Right.
Yeah,
There's a
I think so.
very tied to it too, because of
So I mean, there's
lyrics.
probably a few legal things they'd have to jump through to do it, but
Yeah.
I think if Paramount wanted to, if they could do it. I don't think it's unsurmountable by any means. I think most, I don't even know if Filmation even exists anymore.
No.
So.
Sadly, they've all passed away. And it's like with, if they want to do it and they want to make the money, they can make it happen. And I keep saying it, and I'll keep saying it in 2027. I really feel like copies of the unaltered Star Wars will be found. They will be released by Disney for a limited time, and it's gonna sell like hotcakes.
I have a copy of the original that you can get it online. If you do a little research, you can get the repiece together from the 70 millimeter, 75, whatever it is millimeter film.
But for them to do an official release where it's,
it would be nice.
High def or Blu-ray, whatever.
Yeah, the last version was on VHS.
Yeah, and that's the one
which is what I have. Yeah.
It would sell like hotcakes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Lucas doesn't want it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually at one point they did issue the original trilogy opposite the special editions in a clamshell, and I grabbed them, but it was infuriating because it was one of these things where George Lucas says, "You want them? Here they are." And of course, they were filthy prints, the opposite his pristine special editions. But I remember I picked them up at a Target at some point. So they did issue them, but it was completely swept under the rug. You don't want to watch it.
Yeah. The original, the first run in the theater was different than what probably a lot of us ended up seeing. They made a change on the fly.
Well, the episode 4 thing they added, and I saw it before they put that in. I remember
there was some other changes that they did do. You can look it all up on YouTube, videos on it for what they did. But yeah, it was done on. There was changes they did on the fly.
I can deal with putting the episode 4 in their crawl if they want to, but I don't want CGI Jawas and
I agree,
falling off of dinosaurs and all that crap.
It's that early '90s CGI, so it's not even good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a major letdown. One last thing as we're winding down, Ross, in regards to music for the composer James Horner.
James Horner, the man they hired for Star Trek II because they couldn't afford Jerry Goldsmith. They're trying to, it's like kind of like the Planet of the Apes series, where every time they make one, they have to like kind of cut the budget a little more. But in this one, ironically, it's still not as much as they spent on the first one, but it was supposedly more than they spent on Wrath of Khan. Do I understand this correctly? Because it just seems like so much more was on screen with the Wrath of Khan than in this one. But anyway, they had Horner stay, despite the fact that Nimoy actually wanted Leonard Rosenman. He was friends with Leonard Rosenman, and he was really thought about bringing him on in part 3. But as they talked about it, they said, well, it makes sense to bring Horner back because this is like kind of the same story as Wrath of Khan. And instead of going bombastic this time, we're going to have more sweeping lyricism, more romantic. We'll have an emphasis on that kind of thing rather than the action music to try to get at the core of Spock and the whole mystical elements and all the mystical elements in the film. Anyway, so they got Horner, and sure enough, for Star Trek IV, he was too expensive, and they went with Nimoy's friend Leonard Rosenman. But so there's a lot of ties, of course, to Star Trek II in the music. But also, they reissued the soundtrack for Battle Beyond the Stars recently, and I don't own it, but the samples that I've heard, I realize, Horner's kind of notorious for lifting from his own, not only his own work, but from other composers. And there's a lot of Battle Beyond the Stars in the Star Trek music. I don't have the soundtrack, but I want to hear this. And also, supposedly, he took a little bit of a score from Brainstorm and put it in there.
I believe I have the soundtrack for Star Trek 3 on LP somewhere.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, that's available. Yeah. Or was available. It is. I mean, they reissued it also. He always lifts, established classical music composers, and Prokofiev's got to be one of his favorites. He always takes from the Battle on the Ice from Alexander Nevsky, Prokofiev. But in this one, I'm watching, and as the Enterprise is going down, I'm hearing the finale from the Romeo and Juliet ballet with the surging strings, the waves of the strings.
Well, even John Williams, he took from other composers. They all do. I mean, it's
but Williams is kind of unapologetic about it because it's kind of it's kind of in Star Wars anyway. because it's Star Wars takes from so many. To me, it's like a postmodern score. I didn't know this when I was a kid, but when I started to learn about all the influences in the movies, where they're picking out, okay, there's a cowboy movie, a pirate movie, a Kurosawa film, or what have you, and they throw it all into one film. Sure, why shouldn't Williams do a little Holst, a little Stravinsky, a little Prokofiev, a little William Walton? But also, I'm sure he got a temp track. Williams probably showed it to him and said, "This is what I want," kind of on the soundtrack, and went to his record collection and had that on. Yeah, because all these directors always do that. Only now they all cut to whatever was popular in the last year, and they put that soundtrack on the laptop and say, "Here, I already cut the scene to this music, so write something just like it." But be that as it may, I don't know. So that's and he wrote a new Klingon theme, which was kind of a little bit reminiscent of Jerry Goldsmith's. It had the percussion and stuff, but it was still different. So yeah, I mean, I think Horner was a great film composer. I think he had a real problem with originality sometimes. I mean, just to the point where he would steal people's themes and things. But this wasn't, his worst offender. But I was just surprised to hear Romeo and Juliet turn up in the death music, the end of the ballet when the Enterprise is going down. Mm. So, but yeah, good on him. I was sorry when he died, because I always enjoyed his work.
How long ago did he pass, Ross? It's been a while, right?
It's been a little bit. Yeah, I can't remember. It could be 10 years, could be a little more. His plane went down. He was amateur, like Harrison Ford. He was a pilot, and his plane crashed. Yeah, and it was a real loss for film music, because you don't get guys like Horner anymore. I mean, I just kind of wallowing in that sound, watching Star Trek 3, it just made, I was cocooning with it. And that's almost like, it's a pun, because he did cocoon. But I mean, it does make you, you don't get a lot of that in the movies anymore. It's all the Hans Zimmer. What's that?
Yeah. This is John Denver died the same way in an experimental aircraft. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was in the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And he did so well for himself,
Yeah.
So it's a shame. We would have gotten maybe 10 more years out of him, I think, in the movies.
We're really lucky to have John Williams still around. I mean, he's what is he, 90, 91, 92?
90, born 32, so 92.
Yeah, close to Shatner's age. I mean, he's still...
It'll be a sad day.
Yeah.
It will be.
The day the music died.
Yeah, the day the music died.
But folks, we are going to wind it down. So if you have any last minute comments you want to post in the comments section, and then we'll come back to it. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go to our shout outs. So with that, I'm going to let Mike and Marybeth, you guys may or may not know what you're doing, but give a plug to your show that's on Wednesday
I think we're going to do, I think we pretty much decided we're going to do Futurama, because we haven't
done we did talk about Futurama.
So good news, everybody. We're going to do Futurama.
Cool. And you guys are on Wednesday nights.
Wednesday 7, right?
7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and that'll be June 5th. And Ross, if I'm not mistaken, and I didn't make a separate slide for it, but I'll announce it during the week, and I'll actually do it on Wednesday. If I'm not mistaken, June 5th is your 4-year anniversary on the show that you officially came on. So,
and we're not on. So I get to celebrate.
Maybe what we'll do is I'll make a 60-second video or a 2-minute video, and we can just post it out. So there you go. But anyway, so yeah, make sure you tune in to Mike and Marybeth Wednesdays and 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and they will be talking about Futurama. And also, I want to give a shout out to Country Gate Players in Belvedere, New Jersey. If you are in the area of New Jersey, check them out. The website is www.countrygate.org. Or you could also visit my friend and owner of the theater, Bill Scorado. It's www.billscorado.com. And right now, Bill is working on Pollyanna. It's a musical for youth, and it will be premiering the weekend of Friday, July 19th, and it's going to go through to the 20th, and then it will also be on Saturday, July 27th. So you got 3 days to catch it. And again, that's Friday the 19th, Saturday the 20th, and Saturday the 27th. Also, shout out to our friend Phil, Captain Phil's Planet, WUSB 90.1 FM, Stony Brook, New York. The captain's schedule is on Friday nights from 9 to 11:30 p.m. I don't know what Phil is doing, even though I was texting back and forth with him earlier, but definitely check him out. and you can check out the captain on WSB 90.1 FM. Right now in Kentucky, Wonderfest is going on. So if you are in that area and you want to check out a convention that's taking place, go to www.wonderfest.com. It's going to be Saturday and Sunday. And Nick Tate is actually going to be there. Alan Carter from Space 1999. Also, Jeffrey Morris is going to be there. And he's also a friend filmmaker that is working on The Eagle Obsession. And I'm not sure. I think Jeffrey's arriving on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. I believe Nick may be there before then. But anyway, definitely check out the schedule and check out the website. It's going to be an awesome show that's taking place. And there's going to be a lot of information regarding the movie. They're flying actually back from Pinewood Studios. They were having Nick back in his Eagle cockpit.
I saw lots of pictures of Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting in that. So that's taking place. And if you want to find out information about the documentary, you can go to www.eagledocumentary.com. The film is about 85% complete. It's going to be premiering next year in 2025. Very excited about it. There's a lot of stuff that's happening with this. And yeah, it's going to be really cool. Also, want to give a shout out to Star Trek Original Series Set Tour. Marybeth, did you want to give I'll let you give a plug in regards to...
Yeah, so July 13th, 12, 13, and 14. The one and only Mr. William Shatner will be back with us. Be aware that all the Admirals packages have sold out, but we still have plenty of other tickets in all the other tiers. And we hope to see you there. And not only do we have William Shatner, but we also have Sandy Gimple, who played a Telosian and the Salt Vampire. There's Sandy. And we've got Dave Tallada, who wrote, there's Dave, who wrote the Star Trek Lost scenes. So he'll be sharing some Lost scenes with us. So, and I want to say Darren from the Treksperts will be there, and I bet David Gerald will be there as well. So yeah, there'll be plenty to do. It's going to be a great weekend. Tickets are available at StarTrekTour.com now.
And we'll be there.
Yeah.
And we'll be there. Meet us all in person.
Yeah. And want to give a shout out for the Space 1999 convention taking place in London, England. This is going to be taking place in September. The dates of the convention are going to be from September 11th through the 17th, 2024. That's going to be the entire package. But if you just want to go to the convention event itself, that will be taking place on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which is going to be, I believe, the 13th, 14th, and 15th. There's a lot of information to check out, a lot of guests that are going to be there. Catherine Schell was just recently confirmed. Nick Tate is going to be there. Prentice Hancock. And there's a lot of other people. Yasko is going to be there. Yasko Nagazumi. Suzanne. If you're a Star Wars fan, Quentin Pierre. He was an Emperor Guard in the second in Empire Strikes Back. No, I'm sorry. He was a Bespin Guard. I'm sorry. And then he was also one of the Emperor's guards in Jedi, but he was also security officer throughout the 2 seasons. So a lot of information. To go to the website for the convention, you want to go to www.space199950years.com. Again, www.space199950years.com. Also, I want to give a shout out to my son, Ryan. He has a website that's up and running, no pun intended, and it's run by Ryan. Empower Your Run. He does online run coaching, and he's a service provider. And any information that you have or questions that you have, all you have to do is pretty much register. There's no charge to register. It's free, but you can find out about what he has. There's different levels, different tiers, and it's www.runbyryan.com. And also I want to give a shout out to Martha. Martha has Studio One Thrift. She has had, this is an online service now. She just recently opened the physical store location last year. They just celebrated their 1-year anniversary. And she has quality, stylish, affordable clothing for men and women. You can receive styling tips and informational updates. All you have to do is register at www.studioonethrift.com. And Ross, if you can tell us about what you've got coming up.
All right, these are the 3 recorded shows I've got going right now. Picture Perfect is on right this very minute. There's probably about 10 minutes left. And I'm playing all 80s sword and sandal music tonight from Sword and Sandal flicks. So Conan the Barbarian is wrapping up right now at KWAX at the URL listed. Sweetness and Light is my light music show. That's Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock Eastern, or 3 hours earlier on the West Coast where the show originates. Actually, I record it here, but I send it out there. And this weekend, it's a graduation season, so it's all academic marches and music about student life, and a surprising number of pieces inspired by student drinking songs. So that's tomorrow morning at 11. There are a lot of them. And The Lost Chord tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Eastern focuses on Sir Edward Elgar, who composed the famous graduation march, the pomp and circumstance. But these are all accidental stereo recordings made by the composer. And what I mean by that is the engineers had multiple recording devices going at the same time in case there was a slip up. They didn't want to mess up the breaks on the sides of the medium. So what they did is they combined these various devices into stereo reproductions of his music from the 30s and 40s. So that's what it is. It's Edward Elgar and experimental stereo tomorrow night. That's Pomp and Happenstance at 7 o'clock on The Lost Chord. I tease these programs on my Facebook page. So if you ever want to look it up at Classic Raw Samico, you can find out more about the shows. I'll write about Sweetness and Light and The Lost Chord tomorrow. But that's the URL right there, kwax.uoregon.edu. Fun fact, by the way, University of Oregon was actually where they filmed Animal House.
Oh,
so it'll tie right in with
Cool.
my.
But it was modeled after Dartmouth, which is right down the road from me.
Is that true?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
It was supposed to be Dartmouth College. Basically, it's a very similar town. Where
where they were going to film Animal House, yeah.
Well, it was based on Dartmouth College. That's where they got the idea, the fraternities, the way the town was laid out. They didn't shoot it there, but it was based on.
Right. Yeah, I know nobody really wanted to touch it when the script came through the screen.
I'm sure Dartmouth did. They didn't want to be associated with it.
Yeah, but University of Oregon said, "Well, what the hell? What the hell? We've already got Donald Duck as our mascot."
Right.
Quacks.
Another great movie, though.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that is a great film. 1978, if memory serves me correct.
Yep.
Thanks, Ross.
Yeah, thank you.
And folks, just to let everybody know, there will be no show next weekend. I'm actually Sherry and I are celebrating our wedding anniversary, so we are taking off next weekend. Thank you. So that is actually on Sunday. And also, just to let you guys know, Adam Nimoy is actually on Friday is actually doing a book signing tour. He's actually going to be up in up on the border of New York and New Jersey. I can't remember the town, but he's actually making the rounds, and I think he's going to be in Manhattan too. So he has a book out, and I don't recall the name of it, but you can obviously go online and check it out, but to get the schedule. So that's taking place next Friday. So no show. And then Ross and I will be back the following week on Friday, June 14th, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and we're going to talk about the classic 1965-1969 four-season series, The Wild Wild West.
Not to be confused with the movie.
No.
Yes, not to be
great TV show.
It was
Great TV show, yeah.
Another favorite from my youth.
Robert Connor and Ross Martin. It was such an excellent series. And one tidbit about that show was canceled. It wasn't because of the ratings. It was because it was supposedly too violent. There was a shift in, I guess it's CBS or, in management. And then they pretty much had it taken off the air because of that. But it was definitely not.
It's kind of the sacrificial lamb, the show that they stood behind,
Yeah, which is a shame. But we'll delve into that in 2 weeks. So, but thank you so much for joining us, though, Mike and Marybeth.
Thanks for having us. It's been a hot minute. Like it's been since Halloween.
Halloween was the last time.
Yeah.
It'll be Halloween again before you know it.
It will be. But you know what? We'll have to before that happens. We'll have to talk about one of the
what we can do. We'll do Night of the Lepus with DeForest Kelly. Maybe not.
Anyway, just wanted to say, everybody, have a wonderful week out there. Thanks for joining. Be safe. And as we always like to say, long and prosper.
And may the force be with you.
There you go. Night, everyone.
Good night.